Thank you, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started now. Sydney?
Good morning, all. My name is Sydney, and I'm going to go over a couple of housekeeping items with you all. Before we begin, we want to let you know that we will be offering American Sign Language interpreting and closed captioning for today's forum. To access the ASL interpretation, please find the videos for the ASL interpreters, which are listed as ASL interpreters, followed by their name. Once you find them, you can lock or pin them to your screen so that you can see them throughout this presentation. To access closed captioning, on the bottom right corner of your screen, there's a multimedia box. Click on that box. You will then see the closed captioning start option. You can select the language, font size, and color that best meets your needs. For your information, this hearing is being recorded and will be posted on the OPWDD website on the strategic planning page, and I will go ahead and insert that link into the chat box for your use. And I will now turn it over to Jessica Pigeon.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This hearing will include a brief welcome from the Commissioner, a brief overview of the contents of OPWDD's Draft 507 Strategic Plan for 2023 to 2027. Following the formal presentation, time will be left for participants to provide comments for up to 3 minutes. We will first turn to those who have formally registered to speak at today's hearing. If time allows, we will then open it up to others who wish to provide comments. Commissioner?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to OPWDD's first virtual public hearing on the newly released Draft 2023 to 2027 Strategic Plan. For those of you who don't know, I'm Carrie Neifeld. I'm the Commissioner at OPWDD. After many months of meeting with stakeholders, the people we support, their family members, provider agencies, and advocates, and of course with some delay as we transition to a new administration and I joined the OPWDD team, we are very excited to have released the draft plan for your review. I know there has been much anticipation, and I am very eager to hear from all of you about your thoughts on the plan and the direction we propose to take as we move forward together to continue to build and transform our service system into all that we need it to be. As you know, the strategic plan, or the 507 plan, as we sometimes call it, is a comprehensive plan for OPWDD and our community, setting the direction for the agency and the system for the next 5 years. State mental hygiene law requires that OPWDD create this 5-year comprehensive plan and update it every year. In 2021, to prepare for drafting the new 507 plan, OPWDD gathered extensive input from a wide range of stakeholders, through testimony at regional forums, through meetings with stakeholder groups, and by email. We invited comments on key areas within our service system. The draft plan is now on our website along with a summary presented in plain language. To be sure that we've included everyone's voice in this planning process, these documents are also available on our website in English and 9 other languages. At this point in establishing the final strategic plan, it is important that we hear from you again. The strategic plan will represent our agreed upon course of action for the next few years. The staff worked to capture within its goals and objectives all the priority improvements, changes and developments that our stakeholders told us were most needed in OPWDD's policies, programs, and operations. As we put together the draft plan you are commenting on today, we kept foremost in our minds the desire to improve our service system, the operations, the policies, and the programs, and our ability to monitor and report on how people are experiencing our services. Each of those things is part of how well we actually help people live the lives they want to live. So the draft plan and the many activities and initiatives it describes, when taken on their own and all together, should lead to more consistently positive experiences within our OPWDD supports and services for people with developmental disabilities and their families. That is our desire for the plan itself, that it will guide us in this very important direction. We'll take stock each year, examining our progress toward each goal and objective, and provide an update. And if needed, we'll bring forward ideas for new things that were not included, but which have become important and necessary to the goal of improving our ability to support people with developmental disabilities in positive and effective ways. And in this way, together, we will continue to mobilize the strategic plan in the months and years ahead in partnership. So to get us started in this process, we have set up several ways for people to let us know what they think about the goals and objectives outlined in our draft plan. In addition to the 2 virtual public hearings, in the coming days, we will announce a series of in-person forums that will take place across the state throughout the summer. I look forward to meeting with you at these meetings and hearing your thoughts and ideas about the draft plan. I know we are going to have good discussions. Throughout the summer, we will also receive feedback in written form through an online form. Again, that form is available in 10 languages on our website. People can seek assistance with filling out that form and can also email comments to us on the draft plan. I encourage everyone to participate. You are our partners in building and sustaining the service system we want for our loved ones, friends, neighbors, and colleagues with developmental disabilities. We will read and consider all comments we receive as we prepare the final plan, which we will make available to submit to the New York State Legislature by November 1st. So without further delay, I welcome you again to our public hearing, and I will turn the program over to Jessica Pidgeon, who will briefly outline the draft plan, after which we will hear your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. As mentioned, this presentation includes a brief overview of the contents of the 507 document, including strategic planning input and data, strategic goals and objectives, a brief overview of the evaluation, conclusion, and appendices you can find in the document. It also includes our larger vision for how we plan to use our 507 goals and objectives to inform long-term planning and some immediate next steps. In addition to what we will share in this presentation, the full draft document includes specific activities and projects to help us meet our identified goals and objectives. As a reminder, the full draft strategic plan can be found on the strategic planning page of our website. To prepare the 2023-2027 507 draft strategic plan, OPWDD invited input from its many stakeholders, self-advocates, family members, organizations, providers, and others in the spring and summer of 2021. Input was provided through 5 regional public hearings, meetings and targeted input from 33 stakeholder groups, including self-advocacy groups, family organizations, provider organizations, disability councils, and underrepresented groups. Additionally, we collected comments via email and through our existing stakeholder committees and meetings, for example, the Developmental Disability Advisory Council. We also analyzed Medicaid data, which is available on our website, staff stability data, and reviewed some national data and trends related to people with developmental disabilities. Through all of the stakeholder engagement and data analysis, the following key priorities were repeatedly identified: addressing the DSP workforce crisis, improving self-direction, improving housing supports and services, supporting people with complex needs, improving OPWDD's use of data and its transparency with its stakeholders, supporting research of programs and services. Some additional categories highlighted include employment, children's services, health, and improving access to supports for those who are from underserved communities. Based on stakeholder input and data, we drafted the following 3 goals for our 2023 to 2027 507 strategic plan. The first is to support people in the most person-centered ways. The second goal is to promote practices that strengthen the workforce and infrastructure. And the third is to advance systems change and innovation across the state. As noted, Goal 1 will focus on supporting people in the most person-centered and holistic ways possible. To do this, OPWDD will improve supports and services for people with developmental disabilities throughout their lifespan by addressing gaps in services and ensuring supports are focused on individual need, offer choice, maximize independence, and increase community integration and participation. To help meet this goal, OPWDD will focus primarily on the following objectives: community integration and participation, which looks to increase opportunities for community integration and participation, supports that facilitate self-determination, and activities that improve social determinants of health. Objective 1.2 focuses on children, youth, and young adults. We'd like to ensure children, youth, and young adults receive appropriate and coordinated services within the context of school, family, and community. Objective 1.3 focuses on expanding and improving services targeted for people with complex support needs, including residential and crisis services and behavioral support. And Objective 1.4 looks to identify and address gaps in services and supports that meet the needs of underserved, culturally and ethnically diverse communities. Goal 2 focuses on advancing the OPWDD system by investing in the workforce, updating the system to better support service delivery, and increasing access to information. Objective 2.1 will look to improve recruitment, retention, and the quality of the direct support and disability workforce. Objective 2.2 looks at data access and transparency with the hope to advance technology and our information infrastructure and explore approaches to increase the availability and timeliness of the data to support decision-making, monitor performance, and assess the quality of services we're delivering. Objective 2.3 looks at stakeholder engagement and input. We're hoping to promote opportunities for stakeholders to inform our decision-making. Lastly, OPWDD is interested in exploring new approaches and opportunities that advance the system, reduce complexity, and improve responsiveness. To meet this goal, OPWDD plans to strengthen the quality, equity, and effectiveness of supports, including the self-direction model, competitive integrated employment services, the continuum of housing and residential options, and our care management services. Objective 3.2 looks to increase opportunities to explore and implement regulatory and policy changes that support greater flexibility and incentivize improved personal outcomes. And Objective 3.3 looks to prioritize innovation by evaluating programs, conducting research, and developing opportunities to test new approaches to our service delivery. The draft document also includes a brief evaluation section and a conclusion, which speaks to our plan to share continuous updates on the status of implementation of our 507 draft strategic plan and the agency's overall progress on meeting our goals. Additionally, we have included various appendices which share additional information on OPWDD services and more detailed overviews of the input shared by stakeholders in 2021. The goals and objectives within this 2023 to 2027 strategic plan provide a roadmap for stabilizing the service system in the short term and lay out important research, evaluation, and innovation activities that will inform ongoing system improvement in the long term. We believe the 507 plan will assist OPWDD and stakeholders to work together to achieve clear and planned progress in waiver and systems reform that move us toward a more person-centered, sustainable, equitable, and coordinated system of supports and services for New Yorkers with developmental disabilities. The immediate next steps of the process include collecting additional stakeholder feedback on these proposed goals and objectives this month and in July and early August, which include holding regional forums throughout the state and collecting written stakeholder feedback. Based on the feedback that we receive, we will make updates and needed revisions to the document. We will then present the new revisions and information to the Developmental Disabilities Advisory Council in August and September per our required 507 language. They're an advisory body on our 507 strategic plan. And then we'll submit the final document to the legislature and release it publicly in November. That concludes the presentation part of this hearing. At this point, I will share information about how you can submit any comments you have in writing, and will then open the meeting for oral comments. We welcome your written feedback through July 29th. Please submit written feedback using our written feedback form or via email, which will be shared in the comment box. In the subject of your email, please reference 507 draft plan. We will now open the meeting for comments. As a reminder, those interested in speaking were asked to register to speak in advance of today's hearing. Therefore, we will be calling on registered speakers first. If time permits, we will then open comments to others who did not have a chance to pre-register. At that point, I will announce that we now have time for additional participants to provide comments, and I'll ask you to raise your virtual WebEx hand if you would like to speak. We will then call on people to share. To hear from as many people as possible, we ask those of you that we get a chance to call on to please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. We will share a timer on screen for speakers to help assist with the 3-minute guidance. Please keep in mind that we do have a lot of people on the call, so while we will try to get to everyone who wishes to share comments, we may not be able to do so. And to allow as many people as possible to provide comments, we will not be answering any questions at this time. We will now begin our public comment period. We will call on speakers one by one, at which point Josie will unmute you. At the end of the 3-minute period, you'll be muted, and Josie will call on the next speaker and unmute them. Josie, first speaker, please.
Naomi, you're unmuted. You can speak.
Start speaking?
Yeah.
Oh, start, okay. I wrote. Good morning. I want to bring up concerns about housing subsidy for people who own their own homes. And people said in the housing subsidy is looking at increase in this plan, but where is the money coming from? So that's kind of a question. I know you can't answer questions. I just heard, but my housing subsidy is 2 HOAs and a mortgage, and both is going up. And nobody's talking about housing subsidy increase for people that own their own home. That's why I'm bringing it up. Is there money from the Rescue Act to deal with housing subsidy for people that own their own home? I asked people in central office and the housing committee through care design, and no one, they all said there's rent money, but that's not going to help me and my friends who own a home. That's why I'm letting you know renting a home does not help people who have a house. Because I bought my house through the Home of Your Own program. Is this a guarantee increase for people in self-direction for raising housing subsidy for people who own their own home? I don't have ISS, and none of my friends have ISS. So I want you to know that. I am looking for true and honest answers, because you're saying there's not an increase in housing subsidy for people that own their own home. It's for people that rent. Well, that's not going to help my friends or me. As I don't have rent, I have mortgage. People say you can ask for rent, but I own my townhouse. Before I finish, there's one other issue I'm having. It talks a lot, completely separate. I hear a lot about parents want people to have job opportunities that don't have, that like shelter, that need a lot of support, okay? But I have a college degree and I've worked, and what is there for people in my situation that would like a state job? I've contacted Kim Hill, but I'm getting nowhere, to work back in the state. I just want you to know that that's not even working for me. For people that can work for the state, I've tried every avenue, and nothing's helping for people that gone to community college or colleges for work. That's why I'm bringing it up. I've done everything I've been told to contact Kim Hill, and no response. Thank you for listening to me. especially hearing my point of view as a self-advocate. It is truly different from a parent's perspective. And glad you heard from me, since I'm not involved in self-advocacy association, and I've always said you've got to outreach self-advocates besides self-advocacy association, because there's so many self-advocates that are not involved in self-advocate, so you still got to find ways. Thank God you found me, but there's so many people that are not involved in self-advocacy, so you're missing a whole lot of people. Thank you for listening to me, especially hearing from my point of view as a self-advocate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naomi. Josie, next speaker, please.
Ralph, you're unmuted.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
We can, Ralph.
Okay, thank you. All right, so myself, advocate also, and let's see, I have a couple of different topics to go over very quickly. First of all, also with regard to housing, different angle, I support what Naomi said for sure. I don't think anyone really is addressing people that own their own home and the expenses that go up in that area. So I don't know much about it, but I support her. I am getting assistance through the self-direction program and independent housing, and the recent ADM came out just after I had filed an appeal for a reduction in my stipend with the assistance of statewide disability rights advocacy groups, legal organizations. As far as I know, that was kicked back to the regional office just recently. So I am free to speak about that, I do believe. Nothing was really resolved with the substance that affects the policy issues that are relevant to this conversation right now. The most important thing is, in a way, similar to Naomi's concern. For people that need to use a major category of expense as an offset to our income, that involves people that have a Medicaid spend down, as I do. It goes to a pooled trust. No guidance came from the central office, as far as I know, on that issue. That was one of my objections to the reduction. It is critical, and I reference another advocate, Valerie Bogart at NILAG, in her recent statements at the Elder Law Forum on Medicaid changes this year in general, especially for MLTC. She noted that asset issues have issues around the inequity in asset calculations for various kinds of Medicaid were not addressed correctly, and there's still a racial disparity. So to be more specific, for people that have independent housing and they have family that can back them up financially, I do not. For people that have that, they can compensate for the ways that things are being reduced on us. I cannot. We need to look to the pooled trust options to be able to sustain ourselves economically. So I don't want to take too much more time on that, but it has to be addressed. It is a racial justice issue. It flies in the face of other policy objectives in this document. With regard to self-direction, there's still a fundamental misunderstanding that's apparent in this approach, where the OPWD still thinks of, and sometimes describes self-direction as a distinct service. It is not. That comes across mostly in terms of distortions of the representation of use of specific kinds of services and cost of services, especially ComHab. So I'll jump then to just talking about data. There is no excuse, because I'm running out of time, there's no excuse for not doing crosstabs. In other words, comparing for different subgroups the Medicaid expenditures year over year for certain categories of services, including medical. This is 20-year-old database technology. Myself and others addressed this with OPWD in the DAC meetings and afterwards with Ms. Tamika Black. No progress has been made since 2019. Those updates on data should be part of this document. It's not there, and that I think will be a major objection for some groups. And then finally, the other thing that's critically missing, I'll just mention with my seconds running out, is the CAS. Nothing on the new resource balancing model and tiered, the way we'll be putting to tiers for resource allocation. I'll stop there, obviously.
Thank you, Ralph. Josie, next speaker.
Next, we have Karen. Karen, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Commissioner Neifeld, the issue I'd like to raise today is OPWDD's approach to revealing the extent of current and projected unmet need. It'll take time for you and your new team to develop programs and to break through the inertia of the system that you inherit. But a decision that you can make now, with no contingencies on future budgets and no reflections on current leadership, is to reveal the extent of unmet needs in a system of services that has been underfunded for years and operating without a strategic plan. You can reveal the number of adults who are waiting for housing. You can tell us how many children who need inpatient crisis services won't get them. You can tell us how the answers to questions on the CAS might limit a person's access to services. When I spoke to Commissioner Kastner at the Stakeholder Forum a year ago, I described how my brother had been approved for ComHab 3 years before and was still waiting to receive the service. That wait is now 4 years. During the week, he receives a total of 6 hours of day services. And while he waits to get ComHab, his applications for other types of service are rejected because they're considered to be redundant. When we have his life plan meeting later this month, the staffing ratios and DSP vacancies will again make his group home reject almost every request for person-centered RESHAP goals. The 507 statute requires OPW to provide an analysis of current and anticipated use of state and local services and to focus on measurable outcomes in order to inform the executive budget. That means it's not enough for OPW to categorize stakeholder comments. The strategic plan must begin by aggregating service anecdotes, like my brother's, into data that it uses to measure current needs and project future ones. Can legislators negotiate a budget without knowing how many more people want the services they're not getting? Can OPW manage programs costing $8.3 billion a year without defining what their outcomes should be? If my brother's CCO can provide data on applications, rejections, and wait times among its members for each type of service, what prevents OPW from doing the same? As the new commissioner, you're asking us to trust you with managing scarce resources and reforming the supports that our loved ones and our families rely on. Transparency, not as something the strategic plan promises, but as something it contains, will make that trust possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Josie, next speaker.
Barb, you're now unmuted and can speak.
Barb DeLong?
Yes.
So, you know my name, Barb DeLong, mom of a 30-year-old beautiful daughter who needs total care 24/7, medically complex, and my hero. She represents tens of thousands of people across New York State. First of all, I'd like to thank the commissioner, the governor, and the legislature on their commitment to people with IDD by the first real action in more than 10 years, a long overdue COLA, which is the beginning of righting the wrongs of the past. Further, a very special thank you to the commissioner and her team, as she has made herself very approachable and available to families and individuals with IDD. For the record, because of the time limit, my comments are very general. I'll be submitting a very comprehensive summary of my thoughts, and I implore you, if you must choose only one to do your data analysis or word count, use my complete written document, and please don't limit it to the first 3 topics mentioned. The 3 primary goals are eloquently stated, and I wholeheartedly support them, as I'm certain most people do. The challenge is to turn these goals into measurable actions which can be closely monitored, reported on, learned from, and then modified and updated as we gain experiences. The current draft lacks timeframes and specific measures. It is critical that these elements be included for each of the objectives contained in the plan. What gets measured gets done, and then it's necessary to also measure how well it gets done. It is essential that these metrics are defined before you begin the measurement process, so as not to measure after the fact, which becomes meaningless. I submit that goal number 1, supporting people in the most person-centered ways, should be the underlying principle of all that OPWDs and their partners should be focused on. All decisions, practices, regulations, resources, including the money, should support that goal. If we spend energy on anything else, it is contrary to OPWDD's guiding principles. Regardless of whether an individual requires 24/7 total care or can live interdependently with supports of their choosing based on their needs, people should always be supported with a person-centered approach. However, it saddens me to say that as long as I have been completely immersed in advocacy, a very long time, the system has used this terminology without the actions to support the concept. For the last several years, I have been involved in many special committees. I was excited to be a member of OPWDD's transformation panel representing families of people with IDD. I was completely devoted to the mission of improving the system. The panel continually emphasized the need for person-centeredness and transparency. At times, what I had to say wasn't popular or polished, but it was truth. We consistently emphasized the importance of less presentations, more actions, worked tirelessly, and believed the panel's recommendations were solid. In the end, I feel the actions were identified only resulted in a laminated large chart, a chart that generally did not get acted on. Within the 37 pages of the plan, there is much exploring, considering, studying, and development, all of which have a price tag associated with it. My concern continues to be, we study, we explore, we develop, but then we do not have the money to do. I understand the ARPAs are one-time expenditure. However, part of the exploration must include an implementation plan, so we don't lose what was studied or learned. Why not work with willing participants to try different approaches, learn from them, fine-tune, and then replicate as appropriate? Let's be action-oriented and results-driven and really, really improve all the lives of people with IDD. Thanks for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Barb. Next speaker, please, Josie.
Brad Pivar, you're now unmuted.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to offer some brief comments on this plan. My name is Brad Pivar. My son Scott is 38 years old and has been receiving services for over 36 of those years. So I'd like to begin my remarks by saying thank you. This agency has been a lifeline. I remain astonished by the commitment that New York State has made to those with developmental disabilities. I have been and remain grateful for that commitment. As far as the draft plan, I see a lot of good intentions, but I'll address those in my written remarks. Right now, I'd like to focus on 3 ways I think the plan misses the mark. The first miss is delaying action in favor of studies. It may be informative to understand how other states or other countries deliver services, but we already know that there are housing models, day service models, SEMP models, self-direction models that are not part of our service structure, but that have succeeded elsewhere. We need to try things, not just study them. And you've heard this already, I'll say it again. The second thing is when we try things, we have to establish performance measures. And third, we know that today's budget windfalls will not last. We know that regardless of how successful the staffing crisis may be abated, we will never be able to deliver services the way we have been for the last several decades. And we shouldn't want to. We should be embracing an opportunity to grow and innovate. We have been hearing about the need for system transformation for years now. I don't think this draft plan is transformative. It's simply incremental. The draft plan also details from various stakeholders their feedback, and that's great. But it paints a picture that I don't recognize. 2 examples. OPWDD has been promoting a transition to managed care for over a decade. And the draft states, those who oppose the transitions noted the limited success of managed care delivery of developmental disabilities nationally. No, we said that managed care has completely failed to improve the lives of people with IDD. In the care management section, it says the first 18 months of implementation were challenging, but through partnership and collaboration, those challenges were alleviated. Time does not allow me to say more than this is an outrageous conclusion, which I will also elaborate in my written remarks. So I'd like to close with just one thought about how we move forward. The success of this plan of transformation, of New York State regaining its position as a leader of IDD services, will be directly proportional to the meaningful involvement of all of the stakeholders, but especially the consumer and family advocates. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Josie, next speaker, please.
Denise Bianco, you're now unmuted.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I work with People Inc., an agency providing supports to thousands of people across Western New York and Rochester. I'd also like to thank Commissioner Neufeld and the OPWDD team for putting together this plan, the first in a number of years. It really signifies a genuine engagement with the provider community. In my 36-year career at People Inc., this is the worst workforce challenge we've ever experienced. And the EPRA-funded longevity and retention payments were certainly extraordinary. Recognition of our DSPs who worked at the height of the pandemic. The 5.4% COLA is also a major win, but it's a start toward the path of making up for much lost ground over the past decade of no increases. And we need sustained efforts in annual COLAs. So we're not looking at remembering a good year in the future when we look back at this period. We strongly support the funding for complex needs and the reform of RESHAB rate setting methodologies for people with complex needs, but also coupled with more accurate input to reflect acuity of need. The current system simply does not produce rates that reflect or cover the proper staffing ratios or clinical supports. An example is our Village Green IRA, which provides support for people on tracks along with 24-hour nursing. Every year, revenue shortfalls. 2020 saw over $1 million deficit for that one site alone. 2021 was 1.1 million. Our Ridgeway IRA for people who are behaviorally involved as part of the downsizing of Monroe, DC, shows a similar story. Expenses over revenues for 2020 were 579,000. 2021 was 773,000. More programs are needed like this, but agencies simply cannot afford to create programs that are not supported financially. We'd also like to be part of the solution in self-direction as an agency that provides over 1,300 support for people for over 1,300 self-directed plans. We know that any improvements to the system can be more immediate and effectual now, and we'd like to be part of that solution. In terms of housing, we support non-certified housing models, and as a provider of integrated apartment settings under HCR, we applaud the ISH funding and advocate for that pool of dollars to be increased, while we can't forget the continued traditional 24/7 homes, because we have hundreds in our regions who are still waiting for appropriate opportunities. In terms of healthcare, the outcomes financially and clinically for nurse triage and remote monitoring systems have been demonstrated, so we look for support now to realize savings and better health comes later. And regulatory flexibility, we support every improvement there really results in direct care support to people, which is really why they're in the job. It's what they want to be here. That's why they'll stay here, is to provide that direct support, not to do administrative work. Looking at redundancies to decrease costs would be the first thing. For example, incident review has a provider review, an OPWDD review, a Justice Center review. So we appreciate the opportunity to be part of the solutions, and thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Denise. Josie, next speaker, please.
Eric Geiser, you're now unmuted.
Thank you. Commissioner Neufeld, I want to thank you for the opportunity to comment on the 507 plan. I'm Eric Geiser, CEO of the ARC New York. I think people know who we are. We are a family-led organization. We provide essential supports and services for people with IPD. We support more than 60,000 people across the state. We employ 30,000 people at 36 chapters, and we are in every county of the state. We are encouraged by the strategic plan. It addresses our needs for a direct care workforce, regulatory reform, person-centered residential and day have services, diversity, equity, inclusion, telehealth, and children with complex needs. In 2021, we offered comments on both the previous 507 draft plan and suggestions for regulatory reform, and we were really pleased that the recommendations were at the forefront and our key objectives moving forward. Much of the plan acknowledges the issues we face as providers, particularly those in the voluntary sector. To this end, the draft plan is commendable. However, we do believe that more specific benchmarks for short, medium, and long-term goals will provide a greater sense of what the field will look like in 5 years' time. Immediate conversations on system operations and regulatory reform would be valuable to discuss and find solutions sooner rather than later. Overall, it's our feeling that the draft plan seems more aspirational than tactical in terms of a 5-year strategic plan with firm deliverables. But it is evident that the draft plan has taken into consideration many of the comments offered over the last few years. This creates more questions to be answered rather than developing a firm path forward. The correct ethos is present and aligns with many of our desired goals, but we would like to see greater specifics and comprehensive strategies. And I want you to know that the ARC New York will be at your side to partner with you to develop those specifics. I cannot fail to mention the dire workforce crisis facing our chapters, which goes beyond the DSPs. It encompasses all classifications of workers across the board. Raising compensation is not a panacea, but it's a critical start. Career ladders, educational opportunities, standard occupational codes, these things will all assist in the long term, but they must be coupled with wages commensurate with DSP duties, responsibilities, and expertise. All other employees must also be afforded similar recognition, opportunities, and compensation. The system works as a comprehensive whole. All parts provide valuable supports and services. Our forthcoming testimony will include more specifics to the proposals in the strategic plan. Since last fall, we have been heartened by the openness and communication of this administration, OPWDD, and Commissioner Neifeld. The goals are substantial but vital, and we look forward to working with the administration to accomplish them in a meaningful way. In the end, it is not about the policymakers. It is about those we support and serve, and those who provide the supports day after day. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you, Eric. Josie, next speaker, please.
Joshua Holmes, you're now unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me? Could you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. My name is Joshua Holmes. I am from SIDDSO, OPWDD. As much as I looked through the draft of the strategic bill, and all the goals set to make it easy and better and the workforce to be more trained and specialized is great. But the retention and retaining bonuses that you guys have set out for the earlier year workers seem to be a result of how our turnover year over year keeps continuously going down. You increase the bottom line without scaling everybody in its entirety, breaking loose and taking completely away from anybody who has worked here for so long. If at all this is going to be something that you guys look to increase. You say you're going to give us a 20% compensation through the one-time payments, but what does that really do for us in the future afterwards? You are making programs for everybody to be able to get into the workforce, but how will they be fully trained? How will you have the older generation of people who have worked there, the DSPs who have worked through the pandemic, lost their families? How are they going to be able to continue to want to work for you if there is nothing that they are seeing for them, both health benefit wise and financially, having to live in one of the highest cost in high cost of living areas in the entire America, and it's just continue to get worse, whereas their paychecks not moving. That has to at least stop, or at least be looked at, so that they could be known that they're going to be compensated and their family is going to be taken care of. And people do care, especially the people who work with them. Like, I understand that the stakeholders are here and they have a say in it, but do you not care about the people who take care of your family as much as you care about your family as well? And that's all I have to say for today.
Thank you, Joshua. Josie, next speaker.
Katie Favre, you're now unmuted.
Thank you. It's Katie Fave, and first I want to thank all of you for all your hard work. I know the commissioners really and the governor pulled together a great team that's doing its best to recognize and support the needs of a really vast population of people with different disabilities throughout New York State. I'm here as a sibling representing my brother Paul and his friends. Paul is what I would consider a pioneer of the disabilities movement in New York State, as my parents were. He is a pioneer because the innovative programs that he that came to be as a young person are things now that look like as ancient history. It was an innovation to deinstitutionalize people and put them into group homes. Imagine that being considered innovative. It was an innovation to develop training programs or even allow people like Paul and his friends into schools. And again, we're looking to innovate programs, and I want to look back a little bit and see what we have innovated, because I think we've done a terrific job. But at the same time, as we hope that New York State is going to continue to lead within innovative programs, I'd like to see some innovatives and actions looking to the next phase of Paul's life. And I'm going to ask the commissioner if we can talk about within the plan what innovations can be included to provide our elderly population with the same determined focus to allow their lives to be better, to allow their lives to be person-centered. I ask that New York State OPWDD include specific action steps that will address the needs of seniors in our population as a priority in their day services and group homes that so many of them live in. It's a major, major part of our population that needs to be addressed. For example, I've read through the strategic plan carefully, and I think that there's pieces that can be included. Can complex needs include and specify for the elderly's needs as they become more complex as they age? Can aging in place be a model for New York State rather than nursing homes as a final residence? Can rate settings that are going to be adjusted be surely adjusted to the needs as people progress with age? Can financial resource models such as ABLE accounts and self-direction be adjusted for ease of use, which would allow people in group homes to have more opportunities for integration and choice? I have several other specific actions that I'd be happy to share. They are based in the strategic plan now, but I think could be more specified to meet the needs of the pioneers who will then be the pioneers for all the other people to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Josie, next speaker, please.
Michael C. Ryder, you're now unmuted.
Thank you. I'm Michael C. Ryder with the New York Alliance for Inclusion and Innovation, and I want to thank you at OPWDD for your commitment to reinvigorating the 507 planning process. So many of the challenges that our system faces today have roots in a lack of planning and communication about future direction for our system. And a robust planning process will greatly benefit all stakeholders, most especially individuals and families, but also for those that operate and serve roles in the system so that they can align their supports and organizations with that articulated future direction. The draft plan as written is exceptional in its responsiveness to the challenges that are articulated by stakeholders, including us here at the New York Alliance. Further, it is also an excellent compilation of initiatives that aim to address the challenges that our field faces. And probably unsurprising to you, we believe there are opportunities to strengthen that plan in several ways. First is prioritization. We recognize that the various initiatives included in the current draft plan cannot be accomplished at the same time. And as they say, when everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. So which of these are the primary priorities, which when once accomplished, can help pave the way for those that are secondary and tertiary priorities? Number two, articulating a larger vision of the system of the future that both ties the various initiatives in the current draft plan together, much like a mosaic would, and which articulates more robust long-term goals for our system for when these initiatives have been successfully implemented. As the commissioner has rightly said about the question of whether OPWDD is moving to managed care or not, that this is not the right question, that we should instead be asking whether managed care will help us achieve our system goals and expectations. Articulating what those long-term goals and expectations are would be very valuable to include in this 507 plan. And for what it's worth, we believe some of those should include, number one, a return to a true person-centered philosophy, which I think has largely been given lip service in recent years, an acknowledgement and addressing our system's continued struggle with the dignity of risk, offering individuals and families a greater array of choices, and helping people with disabilities achieve a greater sense of purpose and belonging. Lastly, number three, I think another place for opportunity here is acknowledging the unsustainability of the current system and the need for change. Our system will likely never again enjoy a sufficient number of direct support professionals or their time necessary to deliver services in the traditional way our system has operated, and that this poses the most significant threat to our system. To address it, we need long-term investments in compensation for DSPs, and the 507 plan should articulate that. Perhaps equally important, though, is the need to shift our system to one that protects and preserves DSPs in their time as our system's most precious resource. We currently occupy the majority of DSP time with well-intentioned but terribly time-intensive compliance activity aimed at assuring quality. In an environment of scarcity of DSPs in their time, the collective weight of these regulatory requirements now threaten the very individuals with disabilities they were intended to protect. This plan would be enhanced significantly by going beyond the regulatory reform initiatives mentioned therein to articulate a series of steps to design, pilot, measure success of the pilots, and build on that experience for future steps, all toward a system that assures quality based on outcomes. And this would align our system much better with the expectations of people receiving supports and their families. We know that these are large systemic goals that will take time to implement. What we believe stakeholders are looking for in the draft 507 plan is a commitment to a process that will help define the way forward, even if all the aspects of that future state are not yet visible on the horizon. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Michael. Josie, next speaker, please.
Michelle Judas, you're now unmuted.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm the parent of a 21-year-old son who has an intellectual disability and history of complex health needs, and I'm here today in my role as Executive Director of Parent to Parent of New York State. I will only be commenting today on Appendix C. We look forward to providing our comments on the plan in its entirety in writing, and we expressly request that only our written comments be utilized in any analysis of our response. At 30 pages long, more than 1/3 of the drafted plan was devoted to Appendix C, which memorializes the process used for obtaining stakeholder feedback and records that feedback. Analyzing and presenting the feedback of a voluminous number of stakeholders is an extraordinary challenge in the best of circumstances, and we all know that these were not the best of circumstances. This process was being managed simultaneously to the state's response to the COVID-19 public health emergency, and the resultant disruption to every system of support foundational to achieving OPWDD's mission. That said, we find the entirety of Appendix C to be flawed, misleading, and incomplete. Stakeholder input was priority ranked using a system that considered the order in which people spoke about topics in their oral or written testimony, how much space or time they allotted to a topic, and the nature of the language used when discussing that topic to determine the order of importance each speaker or respondent gave to a particular issue. Written testimony of those who provided 3 minutes of oral testimony were not used in the ranking of these priorities. Is there any evidence base for using this methodology for determining what an individual feels is the priority order of their concerns? Let's consider how the forums were advertised. Speakers were expressly asked to respond to several questions. Unlike in previous strategic planning stakeholder engagements, these were not open-ended questions. They were very specific and asked the public to comment on things such as supporting the direct care workforce, housing, employment supports, self-direction, and research. It should be no wonder that the items on which comments were specifically solicited would be found to be the priorities mentioned in stakeholder comment, and that relegated to the other category would be everything else, which often included infrastructure issues within OPWDD itself. For instance, the question on research asked in the invitation, and likely budget threats as well, drew 20 IBR employees and 1 research organization to participate. This is not to knock the excellent work of IBR or the very real concerns represented by any of the other priority areas identified for that matter, but it is not surprising that research came out to be one of the top priorities identified. Do we really know what the intention of speakers and respondents were to ranking their priorities? I often minimize and not include at all in comments things that I believe have been well covered elsewhere in favor of new concerns or issues to be addressed. Does that mean I think one is more important than the other? No. I reviewed reporting of previous stakeholder engagements. There was a lot of counting for sure of the number of times various categories, subcategories, and topics were raised, but there was no formula applied to determine what stakeholders felt was most important. There was also more analysis of what the stakeholder feedback was saying and how it would affect OPWD's priorities and planning. At the end of the day, OPWD alone has full knowledge of the system, its opportunities and threats, and access to the data necessary to responsibly determine priorities. They must do that, informed by the DDAC and stakeholder input. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Josie, next speaker.
Sarah Dutero, you're unmuted.
Hello, thank you for having me. Yes, I'm Sarah Dutero. I have a 16-year-old with autism and intellectual disability. He's in an out-of-state residential placement. He'll be aging into adult services at the end of this 5-year lifespan of this plan. I echo the comments about measurable outcomes for this plan and actual data regarding housing and unmet needs. I think OPWDD should confidently take hold of the housing needs and the appropriations needs moving forward for all of the individuals. I have a focus on complex needs. For the families who have individuals with complex needs, the continuum looks something like this. At the very top, the most restrictive, least desirable place for their individual loved one is in the emergency room or a psych ward, chemically restrained. If the housing needs are met appropriately, then there'll be less need for crisis services. And so it's very important that OPWD should own that. The second thing I'd like to talk about is ABA, Applied Behavioral Analysis. I'm a little shocked that there wasn't much more concrete, substantial reference to that in the plan, and here's why. If OPWD is envisaging a transition to managed care, then one of the things that we'll need to look at before contracting with MCOs is going to be network adequacy. And behavioral health is an essential health benefit, and within that, the autism mandates in New York require access to ABA. So this is just the very basics of meeting the needs of individuals with developmental disabilities like autism with intellectual disability, where severe behaviors may be present and may inhibit those other goals about access in the community. So ABA should feature more prominently in the plan. The other reason, residential schools from which these individuals graduate use ABA in conjunction with psychological approach successfully to manage and progress the loved ones that our loved ones that they are taking care of. And so again, ABA is already out there, it's being used, it's what's necessary. It's also a component of other crisis responses throughout the country. It should go alongside the CSIDD, and it should be referenced more in this plan. It's the key to unlocking community access. I hear from day hab providers who are sort of having to fundraise on the side to get a BCBA in order to break down the walls of the day hab and get more individuals involved in the more integrated activities. So ABA should be in the main plan. And just a quick word on licensing. The reason I stress the need for ABA is because you're hoping to work with the OMH and the DOH. OPWD, in order to effectively communicate and collaborate on things like the 988 line, has to know what its population needs. Not, oh, we're going to go out and ask you, but this is what is established for the population, that ABA can serve and assist in those mental health settings. So as part of this integration and collaboration, which I did recommend, I'm grateful for in the plan, let's put some flesh on that and say, well, what is it that we're collaborating on? What can we give you? And that would be the ABA side of it. The licensing of OMH and DOH facilities, that's a fantastic barrier to break down. There's one more licensing roadblock on restraint and seclusion practices, reduction in restraint and seclusion practices. The commission studies on this have found that when the agencies come together, they are not able to share licensed practices because they're all individually owned or licensed for different providers. And that's not okay because that's going to inhibit community access and inhibit reductions in behaviors. So it's vital that the General Counsel for OPWDD take a look at the licensing requirements and own them. And as part of that, with the technical assistance and consultation team, which is excellent, we have to give them some tools in the toolbox. And that can only be done if you reduce these licensing barriers that exist between agencies, between education, and those kind of licenses as well. Thank you very much. I'll also see my written comments.
Thank you, Sarah. Josie, next speaker.
Stacey Osborne, you're now unmuted.
Thank you, Stacey Osborne, on behalf of GROW. We would like to say, yes, the goals in the plan are very laudable. Like many of the other speakers, we have some issues with maybe fleshing out some of how those goals are to be achieved and how they're expressed. I think at the top, we are concerned that the plan beyond the ARP funding doesn't flesh out how the workforce challenges are going to be dealt with. And, as has been mentioned, without a workforce, we don't have a delivery system. And, in addition to, as I said, increased funding and restructuring, there really needs to be some development, or something more specific, because if we go, the ARP funding pretty much is now all spent. So where are we going to go with that? Secondly, we are concerned that there is not enough emphasis on the certified residential settings that, are clearly a preference for many of those who are serviced by the delivery system. Different types of residences being developed or options is wonderful, yet there has been an express, need for more development in those, types of certified residential that families and the individuals, IDD individuals, are looking for. We are also concerned about the changes that may be made as part of the plan to an acuity-based model. I don't think we have any objection to an acuity add-on, but we become concerned when the model changes, because what we have seen in the past is not that there are additions or increases where people's needs are higher, but instead there are subtractions where allegedly the needs are lower. So we do worry about that. We also worry that there is no outline of how we're going to deal with the legacy systems development, such as ICFs. Those are going to remain. And so the question is what is going to be done to enhance and allow even workforce development in those scenarios? As has been expressed, we are also concerned about aging in our service system, as opposed to nursing homes, as one of the other speakers says. We really do not have a plan for dealing with people through their later life stages, and that needs to be in this plan. We are also concerned about, as I said, managed care still being bandied about. We think that, frankly, that needs to be buried, frankly, and it's not a long-term issue that should be dealt with. And finally, we note that there is nothing in this plan dealing with safety, security, and abuse. We've seen around the country issues of safety in facilities, and abuse is still a concern, and yet we have not seen that dealt with in this plan. So those are a number of issues, and we will submit written comments. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Stacey. Josie, next speaker, please.
Susan Flacken, you're now unmuted.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Susan Platkin, and I live in Suffolk County. My 35-year-old daughter, Ruth, has a genetic condition causing her intellectual disability, bipolar disorder, and behavior challenges. Yet she lives a good life with work, fun, and friends in her community, supported by self-directed services. I also represent the New York Self-Determination Coalition, a volunteer organization of parents and interested professionals who advocate for self-direction. On a positive note, the 507 plan does acknowledge the contributions of individuals and families. It puts forward plans and funding for expanded housing options, and it describes some specific projects to increase services for people with behavioral and mental health needs. My sense is that OPWDD's intention is to approach planning in a data-based, proactive way, moving toward using outcomes and performance metrics that are meaningful to people's lives, rather than reactively responding to the crisis du jour and measuring quality by the number of documents filed. Unfortunately, in a majority of areas, this 507 plan doesn't accomplish that goal. It's not really a strategic plan. It's a plan for a plan. For self-direction especially, OPWDD is postponing action by spending precious time and money surveying what they already know instead of actively taking the steps necessary to give people what they need. I was amused to find that the word explore is used 16 times and examine 10 times in the 37-page body of the document. OPWDD doesn't need a survey to know that parents of people supported through self-direction are getting older, sickening, and dying. And if that happens in the foreseeable future, our adult children will be left without the supports and services they need to continue living in their homes and communities. The lack of infrastructure for self-direction also acts as to limit access for people who don't have family with the time and resources to support them. In addition, worry about the future prevents many families from opting for self-direction for their children, even if they feel it would give them their best life. Self-direction families and participants have been meeting with OPWDD for over a decade. We've submitted testimony and comments and voiced our opinions at numerous formal and informal work groups. OPWDD has also invested its time in these efforts. The same priorities always arise: provide access to self-direction for everyone who wants it, eliminate wasted documentation and non-productive oversight, establish consistency in the way services are authorized around the state, and ensure sustainability of self-direction when families are not able to participate. It is deeply sad in the year that the federal government has set the final settings rule, mandating that people be served in the most person-centered ways in the most integrated settings, that we are not using the available resources from ARPA funding and other opportunities to prioritize and advance self-direction now. I'll be submitting more detailed recommendations in writing, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Susan. At this point, we have heard from all registered speakers and will now open to others who may wish to speak. If you would wish to make a comment, please raise your hands now, and Josie will call your name and unmute you. And we'll give a few seconds for those of you who are interested to raise your hand. Josie, first speaker.
Max Donatelli, you're now unmuted.
Hi, this is Max Donatelli. I do plan on sending some written testimony as well, but I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak today. My wife and I have a wonderful son by the name of Craig Donatelli. He has Down syndrome. He's 34 years old, and he lives in a self-directed living situation in Amherst, and it's 25 miles away from our house. And we definitely still have concerns. I guess our biggest concern right now is, is the staffing. We have a wonderful staff that has been working with him and really been helpful throughout the pandemic. And, so we really have some things to be really thankful for with the organization that we've been working with, which is Aspire of Western New York. I'd like to thank you, Commissioner Commissioner Neufeld, and really appreciate being able to have met with you and listen to what some of our concerns are, and really do appreciate the work that went into this 507 plan. I think it does give a good blueprint for movement forward. However, there definitely are some real concerns that we have. Probably the biggest one that we have has been is the direct support professionals and the COLA that was there, which, you know, we certainly appreciate the 5.4 COLA that was, you know, that was put out by the governor's office and by the legislature. We really appreciate that. We do believe that it needs to be more, only because we've had 10 years of really having flat budgets and really not having the kind of support financially that these individuals that are providing such a critical service are performing. And we really do need to be able to have an opportunity to see that this is sustained over a period of time. And this is something that we really have a concern about, because we are able to, in self-direction, be able to pay them right now close to $15. We'd like to be able to pay them more, because we want to be able to attract and maintain really quality staff, because as we get older, we want to be able to feel confident that you know, that Craig is going to be taken care of, is going to be able to get the things he needs, his needs met. And so we do appreciate you know, really looking at the sustainability and really developing, if you can, some kind of a task force who would really be able to look at this as an issue. And you know, really do appreciate the time here to be able to share our thoughts about the future of our son, Craig. Thank you very much for allowing these comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Max. Josie, next speaker, please.
Jennifer Manganiello, you're now unmuted.
Hi, how are you? My name is Jennifer Manganiello. I don't have a prepared statement, but I just had a couple of things I wanted to add to the conversation. I am the mother of a child who is in self-direction, who is 15. I also serve part-time as a broker for other families using self-direction services, and I'm also a professor of public health and health communication. I just want to thank you for putting together the strategic plan. I especially want to commend you for creating a plan in plain language. It's great to see the efforts being made to make information more accessible and easy to understand for everyone involved. I just wanted to add a few comments. Under Objective 1.1 for improving community integration, one of the things I would love to see, there's so much focus on people in the system and using the system, but I would also love to see something about community education in here, in terms of educating the community about how they can be more inclusive of people with disabilities, especially for jobs and hiring and housing innovations. I have a friend whose son is, you know, trying to find his first job, as is my son, and it's a challenge, and I think employers aren't really sure how to address hiring people with disabilities sometimes. So I do think education and communication to the community at large, as opposed to just people using services, would be really helpful. In terms of stakeholder involvement, Objective 2.3, I would love to, I know that there are councils and groups already of families who help advise OPWDD. I would think it would be great to have councils or groups specifically around helping OPWDD collect and analyze data and think about research efforts in conjunction with the research objective that you have for Objective 3.3. For Objective 3.1, improving supports and services, I would love to see communication included in here. I think one of the things I constantly hear from families that I help and from other families is how difficult it is to navigate the system. And continuing to work on communication efforts would be a big factor there. In terms of Objective 3.2 for changing rules, I would love to get information about how to advocate for change. One of the things that's been a struggle for us is that there's a camp cap of $4,000, and my son attends an overnight camp that costs more than that, and he has money in his budget, but we've tried several times to argue to shift some funds over to there, and we are not able to, and it's unclear what the pathway is to try to advocate for change. And last, in terms of Objective 3.3, supporting research, I would love to see grants that are designed to support innovative approaches to things like housing employment and creating a better pipeline of direct support professionals, and have evaluation to go along with that so that we can see what really works and use our dollars in the best way. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jennifer. Josie, next speaker, please.
Leslie Feinberg, you're now unmuted.
Hi, good morning. I do not have written testimony. I'm not prepared to speak right now, but I will be sending in written testimony soon. My name is Leslie Feinberg. I am the parent of a young man receiving supports and services through Self-Direction's the self-direction model, and I am also the president of Supporting Our Youth and Adult Network. Supporting Our Youth and Adult Network focuses on the engagement and navigation of self-direction and supporting other families and participants as peer mentors. So my concerns today about the 507 plan have been spoken to have been approached by all the other self-direction advocates and some of the other parent advocates, as well as Michelle Judah as the executive director of Parent to Parent, and Michael C. Ryder as the director of New York Alliance. My main concern is that there is just too much focus on studying and not enough action. I know that other people have spoken about that as well. I would really like to see how OPWD is going to take action and solve some of the problems that they know exist, because we have been speaking to OPWD for years. And while we appreciate the opportunity for engagement and direct dialogue, we are concerned that it's falling on deaf ears, and we would really like to see more action and less study. And I'd like to emphasize the need for establishing performance measures. There's all sorts of assessments that our children, adults need to go through in order to maintain their eligibility, but none of them require the approach that are the services providing them with what they need. I know another speaker mentioned the fact that there's no record of what the unmet needs are. I think that's something that needs to be addressed. And coming up with a good quality measure for a quality of life, that's a tough one. I understand that, but there has to be something done, because if we're spending all this money with the idea that OPWDD provides supports to lead a richer life, how are we measuring that? And it can't just be on all of the assessments that are a medical model, because that's just like not going to help anyone. So I'll leave it for now. I will be submitting written testimony together with the board of directors of Supporting Our Youth and Adult Network at a later date. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Leslie. At this point, we have reached the end of our speakers, or those interested in speaking. So we will pass it back to Commissioner.
So much for your insightful comments and thoughts today. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to join and to share their thoughts and feedback with us. As we continue to speak with people around the state about the draft strategic plan, we will be tracking many of the suggestions we hear, all of the suggestions we hear, and we'll begin discussing and planning how to use them to create a final version of the strategic plan. Your participation has made this the partnership that we are hoping for, and we will continue to work in partnership as we finalize the strategic plan together. I look forward to continued discussions that we will have on the plan throughout the summer, and I hope to see some of you at our regional forums that we will host in person if you'd like to be there. Thanks again for everybody for what you do every day to serve people with disabilities and to support them, and we look forward to working together in partnership with you as we move forward. I hope everyone has a good day.